Hello and welcome to today's webinar, everyone. The title of today's webinar is Building Stronger Integration Between Procurement and Accounts Payable, Understanding the Cost Savings and Efficiency Gains Possible with P2P Integration. I am Jimmy Lefevre, the Director of PayStream Advisors. I will be leading today's webinar. Before we get started, let's get started with a couple of housekeeping items. First off, the Q&A chat window is where you can type in any questions, and that goes for both our live and our on-demand viewers. If we don't get to them right away, we'll get to them shortly via email. Check out the resource widget for URL links to some additional research resources as well as a PDF of the slide deck. And if you have any technical difficulty, try refreshing the browser or clicking on the Help widget where you'll find answers to some of the more common questions. For those of you that are interested in receiving CPE credit, you must watch at least 50 minutes of the webinar and answer the poll questions. And when those requirements are met, you'll see a little yellow certificate icon in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, and you'll be able to download and print your certificate there. If something comes up and you need to jump off the webinar early or you missed the poll questions, you can always come back later and watch on demand. The full webinar with polls and everything will be available in about an hour after the live event is over. Also, you can email us at cpe@paystreamadvisors.com if you have any CPE questions. All right, everyone. Well, it's time to get started. Here is a look at today's agenda. We're going to start with some trends in AP and procurement. These come from our research here at PayStream Advisors. Then we're going to talk about the differences between automated versus manual procurement. And finally, before we get to some Q&A, we're going to do the how to integrate AP and procurement with automation with Paramount Workplace. And speaking of, joining us today is Foy Maynor. He is the VP of Sales for Paramount Workplace. Foy, welcome.
Thanks, Jimmy. I'm glad to be here.
And we're happy to have you. Again, I'm Jimmy Lefevre. I'm the Director of Research here for PayStream Advisors. For those of you that don't know about PayStream, we are the procure-to-pay, source-to-settle research and consulting experts. So we provide free research and tools and education on our website, PayStreamAdvisors.com. We also do Navigator solution ratings and reviews. We also help corporate organizations like those you see on your screen do process reviews, assessments, and RFPs. So if anyone on the webinar today is interested in any potential consulting, feel free to reach out. Foy, would you mind walking us through a little bit more about Paramount Workplace?
No problem. Paramount Workplace was founded in 1995, so for more than 23 years, we've been doing spend management solutions. We're headquartered in metropolitan Detroit, and we've got offices around the U.S. as well as in Canada. We're primarily focused in our headquarters office with executives, also administrative functionality, support and development, and in the remote locations typically are consulting as well as sales representatives. And spend management to Paramount is certainly requisition and procurement, which we're going to talk about today, along with AP automation, but then also a natural offshoot of spend management. We've also got an expense solution as well as a project time solution that we make available for most mobile and web-based cloud solutions, meaning you can access them via the mobile app and then also access them via your browser. Got more than 131,000 users worldwide. Our application can be run standalone, so it can certainly be the system of record for the procurement and AP automation activities, but we also have integration to many different back office financial and ERP systems so that you're able to validate the details on the transactions such as general ledger account or vendor at the time of entry. Workplace can be deployed as software as a service, cloud-based. It can also be hosted by a third party, or in certain circumstances it can also be on-premise. Many of that's dependent upon the ERP that is being run. And overall, the intent is to make it easy for employees to enter their information, effective for management so that they have visibility to the transactions that are flowing through the process, make it easy for them to approve and see all the necessary documentation, and then powerful for accounting because we're also going to give them visibility to the entire process as well as automatically send the details over to them once the transactions are complete. So it is a horizontal application, but we've certainly seen strength in about 14 different industries where procurement and AP automation will apply. And then this next year I'll give you a graphical representation of some of those customers that might be more recognizable that are using our solutions.
All right, great. Thanks, Foy. We're looking forward to hearing more about the Paramount solution further in the presentation. So next we're going to go to trends in AP and procurement. A lot of the research that we're about to present comes from our survey initiatives. So as many of you probably know, you take our surveys. We do several survey initiatives every year. We survey thousands of finance and procurement professionals, asking them about what are their barriers to adoption, what are the current adoption rates, what are the benefits that they achieve, and we use that information to both do these webinars as well as our research reports, and that's where a lot of this information comes from. So trends in AP and procurement. Why integrate AP and procurement sort of at a high level? I think 4 of the main pillars would be reducing cost, increasing cross-department visibility, increasing control over spend, and higher productivity. So let's see what our survey audience says. First, we're going to look at just overall adoption. So what type of AP automation tool do you use today? Well, 27% said we do not use any sort of tool. They are completely manual. 21% said we have a homegrown invoice workflow solution. Only 16% claim to have a cloud-based invoice workflow automation solution. And then the biggest chunk, 36%, said we use a workflow tool that is part of our accounting software or ERP system. Next, we'll take a look at procurement, e-procurement technology. So again, the numbers are very similar. 17% said we have a homegrown procurement management solution. 20% said we use a cloud-based e-procurement solution. 22% said we do not use one at all. And then 41% said we use a procurement tool that is part of our accounting software ERP tool. Foy, I wanted to ask you, what is it you see in terms of percentages, or what percentage of the market when you come upon an organization are using either AP automation or e-procurement?
Yeah, primarily from our experience, we see some of the same trends that you're looking at in your particular research. We certainly see that the departments do tend to be separate. They tend to be siloed, meaning they don't necessarily communicate with each other. But we also see that there's a lot of people out there that still are not using a solution, or in our particular circumstance with the markets that we deal with, they're using the procurement or AP automation that's available within the back office ERP, which can certainly tend to be a bit limited as far as the functionality that it offers. But again, the trends that you're seeing are very similar to what we run into on a day-to-day basis.
Excellent. Yep. So how about we even ask our audience? I think it's time for our first poll question. So on the next screen, we're going to see a poll question, and we'll give you about 15-20 seconds to answer this question. We'd like to say thank you for you taking the time to take this poll question. It definitely helps our research, some of the research like you're seeing on your screen. So the question is, what kind of procurement software tool does your organization use? The options are: we do not have a procurement solution, we have a cloud-based procurement solution, we use the procurement solution that is built into our ERP, or we have a homegrown procurement solution. We'll give you about 10 seconds to answer that question. Please enter your answers now. All right, great. Looks like we've got a little bit of everyone across the board. We really appreciate you guys taking the time to take our poll question. So continuing with the trends in AP and procurement, let's look at top pain points in accounts payable and procurement. So top pain point in accounts payable is manual data entry and inefficient processes. We see this quite a bit as the driver for AP automation adoption. Next is lost or missing invoices, and then the majority of invoices received are in paper format. With procurement, it's problems that typically arise from poor supplier data management, poor supplier dispute and inquiry response times, and then a lack of compliance with supplier contract terms. Foy, I wanted to ask you, what are some of the biggest pain points you see in accounts payable and procurement when you're looking at the market?
Yeah, the customers that we're talking to do still receive a lot of their invoices in a paper format. We're certainly seeing email and being able to send PDFs of the invoices as becoming more common, and then more and more OCR, so that they're able to scan the invoices and recognize the information, is becoming in much higher demand from the customers that we're talking to. And on the procurement side, same type of thing in regards to suppliers. On the front end of the procurement side, at the time that you're looking to request goods and services, it's the fact that you're not able to engage with vendor contracts in order to be able to get the best price from the best vendor, because you simply don't have the data or the relationships in place. And on the reverse side of that, because again, accounts payable and procurement tend to be disparate departments, you're not able to have the consistency and the visibility there, which impacts the supplier relationships because they're not getting paid on time.
Yep, that's exactly some of the things that we see as well. Not getting paid on time, increased supplier inquiries, wanting to decrease those on the AP side, or supplier relationships from procurement. So those are some of the pain points. What about some of the goals? That's what the next slide covers. So going into looking at AP automation, looking at procure-to-pay and e-procurement, accounts payable's top goal was to reduce overall payment costs. So that's having to do with staff, processing times, processing costs, etc. A little bit later, we'll actually look at some of those costs and what they are in terms of our research. Also, better cash management and just an overall reduction in paper. Too often we hear in accounts payable departments that they're just drowning in paper and that life just really isn't that great. That really, speaks to the quality of life when looking at automation for an AP clerk or an AP manager. It can get a lot better. For procurement, it's increasing supply chain efficiency, improving supplier relationships, again, a common theme, and improving supplier validation and reducing risks. So when it comes to some of those costs that I was mentioning, let's look at what some of those are. So we have the cost per PO and invoice, or the cost per invoice and PO on the screen. We found that the average cost per invoice is around $15 for novice organizations. These are organizations that typically are completely manual, completely paper-based. Still, obviously, having inter-office mail carts, sending invoices from one desk to another to be stamped and then sent on for approval and eventually probably mailed paper checks. Mainstream generally about $6.70 per invoice, and we're talking probably some early adoption of some automation, maybe 5, 7, 8 years old, maybe some on-premise type stuff using scanners, that sort of thing. Innovators are generally using cloud-based automation, and they're able to get that cost down to $2.36 per invoice. When we're looking at a price per purchase order, price goes up quite a bit just across the board. There's a lot more people involved. That definitely increases that price. $91 per purchase order for novices, $65 per purchase order for mainstream, and just under $23 per purchase order for innovators. Again, the differences between novice, mainstream, and innovators: novice is completely manual. Mainstream has some form of automation. It may be a little bit legacy. And then innovators are using modern cloud-based tools. So when we talk about the difference between a $15 invoice and a $2 invoice and a $90 purchase order and a $23 purchase order, the implications can be quite large. So why is it then that everyone's not integrating procurement and accounts payable to be a procure-to-pay department and implementing automation? It's quite a conundrum. I mean, when we look at the research, 64% of organizations still say their AP and procurement departments are completely siloed. And I think a lot of that has to do with the culture. The culture between accounts payable and procurement has often been seen as an us and them mentality when it certainly doesn't need to be. These two departments are heavily related, heavily dependent on each other to get their work done. So I think it's a big part of it starts with sort of changing the feeling that you have towards your fellow procurement colleague or accounts payable colleague. 20% said that they were completely integrated, and 16% said there were probably some shared leadership, some shared goals and metrics, but the complete integration is still emerging. And what about implementation of a shared services center? Most organizations say they do not plan on implementing a shared services center. It's about 52%. 30% say that they already have one in place. Many of these are larger organizations with, $1 billion or more in revenue. Shared services center, pretty common there. And then 18% said that they are planning to create a shared services center. So again, on this theme of integrating procurement and finance departments, we asked organizations what are the main challenges that you experience. 60% said a lack of visibility between departments on the status of transactions. 53% said difficulty attaining information between departments. Next largest answer was poor communication between departments on key issues. 37% said that we do not experience many issues and are satisfied with our procurement and finance team interactions. That probably goes back to that 20% or so that said that our departments, we have a P2P department. They're completely integrated. Again, back to the thing I was just talking about, the cultural differences between the departments that create synchronization difficulties, and the problems go on and on. Late payments, poor transfer of vital data, departments are operating with different technology systems. I'm sure a lot of the audience can relate to some of these challenges today. Foy, I wanted to ask you again, what are you seeing in the market? What are the biggest challenges in integrating an AP and procurement department?
Yeah, we talk to a lot of prospects as well as existing customers. A lot of our existing customers may have the procurement solutions that we offer and not have the AP, or have the AP and not have the procurement. And the biggest thing that either one of the groups or both of the groups talk about is visibility to information. AP will complain that their biggest challenge is they don't have access to the original requisition, the quotes that may have been attached to the requisition, or even the purchase order. They certainly don't have access to the approval routings that may have taken place on that. And without that access, then they have to go do a bunch of research to be able to find out if everything's correct on the invoice that they have that they need to pay. And the reverse is also the same. From the procurement side, the requisitioners want to know where their transactions are in the process, what has happened to them, what needs to happen to them. And often, if they're the ones communicating with the vendor, they want to know the status of the payment. Has the check been cut? Or if it has, when was it cut and sent out? So certainly, visibility to information throughout the entire process and access to that information by both of those departments is something that we see and talk about every single day.
Great. Thanks for that insight, Foy. I wanted to hand it over to you for a few slides and have you talk about what the Paramount perspective is between automated versus manual procurement.
Certainly. Thanks, Jimmy. I appreciate that. So let's take a look at manual procurement for a minute with some of the details and the information that we have here on this slide. With manual procurement, the procurement professional is overworked and spends valuable time on no value-added task. From a requisitioner standpoint, you have to manually look up and search for items, or maybe even call the vendor directly and ask them about the items before you can even make your request. Therefore, requests are typically out of policy, and you don't have any ability to track the request against a budget that might be in place. From the approval side, that's also a manual process, and it tends to be complicated and lengthy. It can be complicated because the approvals are based upon phone calls or yelling at somebody across the office, or it could also be email approvals. You're seeking the approval via email. But either way, it extends the approval process, which makes the overall process less efficient. From the receiving side, once you actually have the purchase order created and the goods delivered or the services performed, it's lack of visibility to the original requisition and to the final order that was created. And that can obviously cause problems if they don't match up, if the receipt isn't the same as what was on the purchase order. From a buyer standpoint, they have to manually verify their order, status with both their coworkers and their suppliers. The coworkers want to know when are their goods going to be here, and then the suppliers, you have to reach out to them and speak to them or send them an email to find out when they're going to be there. So again, it lengthens the overall process of procurement. We talked about supplier relationships earlier, and when you have a manual procurement process in place because you don't have the data and you're spending all of your time in this process, you're not able to work with the suppliers as you should be to have vendor contracts in place, so you have non-competitive purchase agreements. Essentially, you're buying, or the users are buying whatever it is that they need or want, and not necessarily at the best price from the best vendor because of those weak supplier relationships. And at the very end, the reconciliation with the accounts payable department, you've got to manually send the fulfilled order to accounts payable, and then accounts payable has to wait for the suppliers to send the invoices for the closed POs. Again, resulting in a lengthy process from the time that the requisition was created, the PO is created from the requisition, as well as the receiving and the invoice matching. When you automate the procurement process, the procurement professional is more productive. They're better able to focus on strategic value-added tasks. So from a requisitioner standpoint, you can enter the requisitions via catalog, punch out the vendors, and use shopping list templates. You've also got mobile app entry so that wherever you are, you've got the ability to be able to enter your request. From an approval side, you can get notifications when you have items that are pending your approval. There's built-in policies in place that are automatic as soon as the requisition is submitted, and there's escalation rules. There are alternates that can approve in somebody's place, and then there's budget controls, because now since the transactions are being entered in an electronic format, you're able to compare them to budgets, see where you are within the budget, get a warning if you're over budget, and now the approvers have that same visibility to the budgeting process as well. Receiving's got full visibility into the requisition and purchase order for order verification as well as confirmation. The buyer has real-time visibility into the status of the requisition, the purchase order, the supplier status, as well as order fulfillment. And it's not only the buyer that has that, the requester has it as well. The requester is now able to see where their transaction is in the process, if it's being held up in approval. They know when the PO was created. They know what the promise date is. So there's fewer phone calls, there's fewer emails because of the access and visibility to information. And now you're going to improve supplier relationships. Suppliers can have access to a self-service vendor portal. That could be a supplier network for communication. Information's easily exchanged, and they can also maybe do maintenance on their own information, and it enables you to have better dispute management when those do arise. And this results in effective and tight supplier relationships. And from a reconciliation standpoint, you're integrated and there's transparent communication between procurement and accounts payable. And the benefits of automation and integration. Automating the two departments helps to ensure a more streamlined, efficient, and controlled integration than a manual initiative alone. Procurement software platforms have built-in controls and advanced technical integration capabilities that make it simple for companies with many different internal teams, locations, and strategies to consolidate the processes into one digital environment. And some of the benefits of integration include lower cost, higher savings. These are mostly associated with workflow. By shortening the time and steps necessary for purchasing, invoice management, and payment life cycles, organizations reduce their processing costs. Faster cycles can also lead to increased discount capture through early payment discounts, and in some instances, companies can also save on labor costs as they consolidate certain roles within one department, or even allow those roles to now be able to do a better job or a more efficient job because they're not focused on the manual task. Another benefit of integration is increased visibility into spend and employee activity. That allows organizations to pinpoint maverick spending, which is essentially asking forgiveness rather than permission, fraudulent activity, or inefficient purchasing from non-competitive or outdated vendor contracts. So bringing spend previously managed by two different teams under one umbrella allows companies much more control over that spend and enables them to use their resources more strategically.
That's accurate, absolutely. So I think this leads in well to our next poll question. which is, what are the main benefits you hope to gain from automating procurement? Is it cost reduction, more visibility into spend and data, ease of requisition and approval process, integration of AP within the procurement process, improved collaboration with AP, or contract compliance and off-contract spend reduction? I'll give you a few seconds to answer here. All right, everyone. Thanks again for your participation in our poll question. So the next few slides go through our cost per purchase order calculator. This calculator is available at Paramount Workplace's website, as you can see below, and it's actually a joint effort between Paystream Advisors and Paramount Workplace. Paramount actually sponsored the research that went into this calculator coming about. The numbers that you see here around industry averages and some of the research and numbers behind it comes from our almost 2 decades of research into procurement and accounts payable departments. And we really stand behind these numbers. Floyd, do you want to talk us through the next few slides and describe the calculator?
Yeah, Jimmy, I'll be glad to. So the calculator is actually very simple and easy to use. As Jimmy said, there's already some industry averages in there that have been populated, and then we're simply asking you to input just a little bit of information, and you can certainly do this multiple times so that you can see what the savings are. So as you look at this first screen, based upon some of the data that we've looked at, as well as some of the poll questions that we've already asked, you know, how automated is your current purchasing process? So a scale of 0 to 10, put that number in, and that's going to help determine some of the additional information below. And then from there is, what's the average salary of a requester? What's the average salary of a department approver? We've got the industry averages there, but again, if you're different, you can certainly make those changes. And then the number of approvers that you have per purchase order. Again, the industry averages too, as we're seeing here. That's one of the things that we talk about early on is the approval processes, and we'll talk about a little bit more here in just a few minutes. But we do typically see, even in our experience, that there's 2 approvers, typically the person's manager and then maybe somebody from that particular department. But then there's exceptions. If something goes against budget or something's a part of a project, then you may add additional approvers. So you'll put your numbers in there, and then that'll help as we move on to the additional information on the next slide. So this is, again, is a little bit of the same details. At the top, you're still focused on the purchasing personnel. You know, how many do you have and what's their average salary? And then ultimately, how many requisitions on a monthly basis do you issue? And you can see that this calculator also combines the accounts payable department as well. So go ahead and enter the number of clerks, managers, and supervisors, and then how many monthly invoices do you process. And then once you're done, you're going to be able to click on Calculate, and it will show you the savings with an automated solution. So you can see the data here that'll look at the current cost, the cost with automation based upon what research has been done here, and then the total savings. So even in our example here on the slide, you can see that there's significant savings by automating both your purchase to pay as well as accounts payable solution. And again, this is available at the link at the bottom of the slide. You can also go to our website, and when you go to our website, at the very top, there's simply a link that says Calculator. You can click there, and then you'll go straight here and be able to enter the information. And also, once you complete the entry on the calculator, there's some additional details from some more research that Paramount Workplace sponsored with Paystream, and you'll be able to download some details there and get a little bit more about the manual as well as the automated procurement processes.
Great, thanks, Floyd. So this next section, we're going to tag team a little bit. It's sort of a guide of how to integrate AP and procurement with automation. But Floyd, I'm going to let you take the next slide.
Thank you, Jimmy. And what we're going to talk a little bit more about is the actual AP and procurement integration automation. So by integrating purchasing and payables departments with an automated solution, it's going to help your organization not only consolidate spend, but also allow you to get more spend under management than you do with a manual segregated process. This change is especially valued to CFOs as it gives them a chance to restructure the spend categories and optimize the company's cash flow. So it allows organizations to identify inefficient purchasing strategies or supplier contracts and catch fraudulent spending. So let's take a look at some of the tools that we can use to be able to integrate the automation. So one of the things that I've been mentioning throughout the process is visibility, access to information. And a key part of that is being able to monitor the status of the transactions as they go through the process, but then also provide information at a glance to the user. Metrics are a very popular way to be able to do that, so that you can see how long does it take for somebody to approve a requisition, how many requisitions for a particular user are being disapproved, what vendors are we spending the most money with. So some very effective graphical representations of data that you can look at and use, and then even drill down on to get additional information and additional details. So it's simple, it's intuitive. As soon as you log in, it's right there available to you, and you've got access to that. And of course, depending upon what type of user you are within the organization, you can have different access and different views to information. And it's real-time information, not just for the person that may be entering the requisition, but also for the approvers and also the buyers. Beyond metrics and dashboards, you've also got email notifications that can go out to let you know when transactions are pending your approval, when transactions have been approved or disapproved. There's alerts that can go out when transactions aren't approved in a certain amount of time. You can escalate beyond an approver if they still don't approve after a certain amount of time. You can set up alternates either by clicking a button or using calendar from and to dates so that somebody can approve in the absence of the original approver. And you've also got the ability to customize reports and have queries available to be able to access the information that's been entered, so you can always go back in and find what it is that you need. Those reports could certainly be ad hoc queries, or again, they could also be canned reports that come out of the box or may have even been customized. And you've got audit capabilities throughout the whole entire application. These could be audits of information that changes from a security standpoint, whether that's users or routing rules or departments, so you're able to see what changes are occurring there. And it's also the audit capabilities of the approval routing process, submitted, approved, disapproved with notes, and if the approver or the buyer had the ability to make changes on the requisition, or if the user recalls the requisition, then you've got the audit trails of what changes were made, who made them, when they made them, what they changed it from, as well as what they changed it to. So that's a very key and important part of the entire process, is providing the information to the user in a simple and easy format. Now also from a user standpoint, there's catalogs that can be and should be available to the users to make the experience for them very simple and very easy, and it's a common experience that they use when they shop at home in their personal lives. And that's guided buying catalogs and shopping carts that can be created and built based upon you selecting the items. So the guided buying catalogs can be set up by you. You can get a download from the vendor. You can manually create the catalogs, and because you're creating them, they can be by vendor, by location, by department, by type of item. So you can have catalogs for office supplies, you can have catalogs for audio-visual equipment, or however you need to divide those up. And you can restrict a user to only be able to access the catalog. So the only thing they can do is shop for the items that they're allowed to shop for. And if you're managing those catalogs, then you're also going to make sure that the pricing is correct. So that right there speeds up the process, because you potentially eliminate levels of approval, because you know that the user's not getting something they're not supposed to get, and they are getting it at the negotiated price with the vendor. So as soon as they're done shopping and check out of their shopping cart, the requisition can be automatically generated and immediately be submitted en route for approval. And now mobile catalogs. You can use a mobile app to be able to browse and shop the catalogs just like you can do in your personal experience. Build that shopping cart, and then once the shopping cart's been built, submit the requisition. It'll then route for approval just as if you had entered it via the web over your browser. And then the mobile app also gives you the capability to be able to approve the requisitions that have been created, as well as see a history of those requisitions and get additional information and additional details. And Jimmy, I'd be interested to know, in your research and your experience, what is the adoption rate, or some best practices as far as people using catalogs?
Yeah, great question. I would say best practices around sort of just offering a variety to your clients or to the organization as a whole. It's really going to depend on specific department or company culture. So some companies are really going to want what's called a PunchOut catalog. PunchOut catalogs are obviously where you go to the vendor's website, complete your shopping cart, and that information is fed back into the procure-to-pay solution. So maybe that's Staples, maybe that's Grainger, maybe it's even Amazon. So it's going to be very much natively like what you mentioned, what consumers are using at home. Guided buying catalogs are great too, especially for like new employee onboarding sort of packages, whether it's like a laptop bag and a laptop and a computer stand, that sort of thing. Mobile catalogs are obviously very much key for any sort of employee that's on the go. Maybe it's a consultant or someone in the sales organization. At the end of the day, though, it's all about getting the user, the requisitioner, back to the value add task. Whatever it is they're doing, whether they're selling or whether they're in ops or whether they're consulting, working on a deliverable, that sort of thing.
Yeah, thanks, Jimmy. I definitely do appreciate that insight. And since you mentioned PunchOut, the next slide actually talks a little bit more about what PunchOut is and the benefits of that. So as I mentioned, the guided buying catalogs tend to be set up and maintained by the customer, by the end user, whereas PunchOut are set up and maintained by the vendor, certainly with your negotiation and with your input. So it is your items and your pricing and your catalogs with that particular vendor. But the benefit of PunchOut is that the vendor, are maintaining those catalogs for you. You punch out to the vendor site from within the requisition application, you build your cart, you check out from your cart, those items are then pulled onto the requisition so that you can view them if needed, or it can then also immediately submit that requisition and then have them route for approval. Another benefit of PunchOut is that the order is not complete when you check out. The requisition still needs to be approved. Once it's fully approved, then a purchase order is created, and then when the purchase order is created, that's when it will be sent electronically to the vendor. That will complete the transaction, and then they'll send you the items that were ordered via those catalogs. And I've been doing for procurement for a little over 16 years with Paramount now, and one of the things early on, 13, 16 years ago, everybody wanted to talk about approvals. They wanted to make sure that somebody couldn't buy something that you didn't want them to buy. They wanted to make sure that they eliminated fraudulent activity and maverick spending. And that certainly still is the case today, but a big part of what we talk about today when we talk to our customers is ease of use. You want your users to adopt the use of the requisition solution, from the requesters to the approvers and everybody else along the line. So by making it easy, by making it familiar to what they do in their personal lives, catalogs are a big part of that. And when you're using those catalogs, then it does make it easier for the user, and hopefully as you implement procurement solutions in this particular example, they're going to adopt that and then want to use that, and especially when it's available on your mobile device as well. So let's talk a little bit about approvals. As I mentioned a moment ago, it was all about the approvals, and it still is all about the approvals, but it's not one of those things that you're necessarily talking about as much at the forefront. As I mentioned earlier, typically there's 2 levels of approval for any particular requisition, but there can certainly be more. So you've got very robust levels of approval, unlimited levels of approval, unlimited approval paths, so that when a requisition is submitted, based upon the details that have been entered, it can route to the appropriate people. And very important to note, you should look at a solution where you're able to route for approval by line item information. That way the requester can enter whatever they need. It doesn't matter what vendor it's for. It may not matter what department it's for. Enter the lines that you need via your catalogs, your PunchOut, and shopping list, and then submit that. And then have the capability with a solution for individual lines to go to different approvers or through a different approval paths. or certainly you can keep them all together if you want to, but give yourself the flexibility to be able to have those routing rules. So if you've got 5 standard lines on the requisition that came from a catalog, but then you got a couple of manually entered lines that somebody needs for unique items, or maybe items associated with a project, or maybe even items that go over budget, make sure that they're going to get approved because of that information on the requisition as well. So again, let the requisitions go off to whoever needs to approve them at a line level. Certainly if you have multiple vendors on a requisition, you're going to create multiple POs from the same requisition. But because of the visibility, because of the audit information that you have, you're going to be able to always see where those are and have those details available to you. And then email notifications throughout the whole process, alternate approvals, or even ad hoc approvals, where an approver can say, I want somebody else to look at this transaction, and they can send it off to them and include them in the approval process. You've also got the mobile approvals. You've got email-based approvals, so you're going to get an email letting you know that you've got items that are pending your approval, and you can reply to that email and make entries there. And again, unlimited levels of approval, unlimited approval paths, and approval based upon pretty much any of the details and any of the information that's actually on the requisition itself. And these approvals also extend through the purchase order, so that if you need purchase order approvals, you can have those. If you need change order approvals, those are available. Approvals at the time of receiving and approvals at the time of invoice matching. So approvals aren't just about the requester, they're about everybody that touches the process. So that way, if there's a variant or something different at the time that you do the receipt or the invoice matching, you can also make sure that that gets approved as well. And speaking of invoice matching, one of the key parts of the overall procurement process, and actually a piece that links the two departments together, is centralized invoice matching. So manual accounts payable causes high processing costs, slow invoice approval times, frequent missed payments with vendors, weakened supplier relationships, and overall inefficient use of company resources. So on the other hand, when you automate the AP process, you reduce the cost, you lower the number of missed payments, you raise a company's internal and external efficiency, and it improves the bottom line. So workflow solutions enable AP departments to define how different types of invoices are processed. Invoice matching and routing involves linking invoices to purchase orders and other receiving documents, then sending them through the appropriate approval chain based on terms that are identified within the invoice, such as the PO number. PO-based invoices can be matched against the PO and receipt documents automatically, while non-PO invoices are routed to the appropriate approvers. And all invoices are routed on predefined business rules. User roles and access rights can be set to match the organization's approval hierarchy, and then organizations can delegate the types of approvals for each employee, their level of visibility, and their authorized dollar thresholds. And after an invoice has been approved, it's automatically sent forward for payment. Solutions can create a payment file that is sent to the ERP or your back office solution, which then initiates the payment, or you can completely automate the invoice lifecycle. Solution providers can also offer in-house or partner-provided electronic payment solutions. Another part of the automation process that can also assist with the vendor or supplier relationships is vendor portals. Suppliers are more likely to participate in the automation when the solution that you're offering is supplier focused and you've got tools that offer valuable supplier self-service capabilities that can speed up and streamline the invoice processing. Supplier portals can also allow suppliers to upload invoices, check on the status of the invoices, and communicate with buyers about exceptions and errors. So solutions also enable suppliers to input payment preferences, upload payment information, and verify payment information in real time. And there's a self-service component that can be used in addition to them having the visibility to the information where they can make changes with approval before anything's actually changed to any contact information, address information, or other details. So involve the vendor in the process. Now you're able to communicate with the vendor better and more often, which ultimately is going to result in you getting better prices, better contracts negotiated, and from a vendor side, them getting paid better or getting paid on time. So Jimmy, I would like to ask you here, in your experience and research, what do you see out there as well as the vendors' a willingness to enter information and perform some of these self-service operations?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. I'd say it really sort of depends on the buyer. So larger buyers are able to, have a little bit more influence over their suppliers. If you want to work with us, you need to use the vendor portal. Overall, I would say that vendors, depending on their individual needs around cash flow and visibility, it sort of varies whether or not they're willing to use the portal. There's a good bit out there that are willing to use the portal, particularly smaller organizations where they're wanting to see the status of invoices and the status of payments and update information so that they can get paid quicker. Larger companies are typically not as willing to use a vendor portal. They have, much more buyers, and they're probably already integrated to various P2P networks that they're used to dealing with. Maybe they have some sort of legacy EDI integration in place or something like that. But overall, I'd say a best practice is to give vendors as many options of interacting with your solution as possible. So not just vendor portal, but also taking email, any way that's really going to continue to automate the process, but not pigeonhole a vendor to one particular type of process.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. And that definitely coincides with some of the things that we hear. A lot of times when we talk about vendor portals with our prospects or even with our customers, they ask us, well, how do I get my vendor to do this? Or, how do I get my vendor to participate? So the answers you gave are, some of the ones that we give as well. It depends upon the size of the vendor. It depends on your size as a company on whether or not you're going to be able to get them to, do some of these types of things and, hopefully improve the relationship. So we've covered some of the key areas of automation. We talked a good bit about the research that's been done by Paystream as well as some of our experiences in the market too. What we want to do for the next minute or two is tell you a little bit more about Paramount Workplace. So as I mentioned, we've been in the spend management business for a little more than 23 years, and some of the key pieces of our solution that we offer are out-of-the-box integration to many of the different mid-market back-office financial and ERP systems. Many of those solutions are still deployed on-premise or offer options for both on-premise as well as cloud. And there's also several cloud-based solutions that are out there that we integrate to as well. We do have standalone capabilities, so we can be the procurement system of record and have all of the information go through our requisition, purchase order, receiving and invoice matching, and then output a file. And we do see that as a popular choice for many organizations that might not have a traditional ERP solution, or they may be in a transition from one solution to another. We do support multiple currencies as well as multiple languages for international customers, and it is a web-based solution and also is mobile-enabled with a mobile app that works on both Apple and Android solutions. So you can use Safari, Chrome, Firefox, as well as Internet Explorer, and then the different devices to be able to access the workplace application, enter transactions, approve transactions, and view history on the transactions. So ultimately, it's visibility to the purchasing, procurement, and AP automation information anytime and anywhere, very simple and very easily. And then because that's being provided, there's multiple authentication modes that are available to make sure that you're keeping the information secure. Early on, I mentioned 14 different industries that we have been successful in. Again, the spend management solutions tend to be horizontal. Anybody that needs to be able to manage their spend can make use of a solution, especially if you have multiple locations, siloed departments, and you need to be able to link those together. But these are some of the industries where we've done very well in over the last few years. Some of them are, if you look at them like not-for-profit, you'll see that. If you see utilities, that's another one. Public transportation, where they are performing against a budget or against grants. So it becomes very important to them to be able to manage their spend. It's very important to them to be able to not only control what is being bought within the organization, but then being able to compare that against a budget, get a warning if you're over budget, route for approval if you're over budget. So those have been some of the key areas where we've been successful in, and government would fall into that as well. We've also done very well in the sports industry with professional sports organizations as well as within the casino industry. So those would be some of the areas or industries where if you are a part of one of those, then certainly take a look at what some of the other industries are doing out there, or other customers in those industries are doing out there as far as their solutions. And we've got success stories in each one of these areas. And again, even if you're not in one of these industries and you still feel the need for spend management as well as the benefits that you can get from that, certainly feel free to reach out and we'll be glad to answer any questions or assist you there. We do have a worldwide presence, and so we certainly have customers all around the world. Vast majority of the customers in North America, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, as well as the UK and Europe. But as I mentioned a moment ago, we do have the multi-currency and multi-language capabilities, so it can certainly work with organizations that are in different parts of the world, or it may have divisions, departments, or locations there as well, so that you can use the solution and then make it simple and easy to use for those users too. And as a company, we've been doing this for a very long time. I mentioned since 1995. I myself have been with Paramount since 2002, and we have a very tenured employee organization on many different sides that have been doing this for a very long time as well. This is all we do. We do spend management solutions, and we've been developing those for that time. So we take our customer experiences, we take research from within the industry and what we're seeing out there, and we always are looking to build and enhance our product based upon that information. Because this is all we do, we tend to be able to roll out new features as well as custom functionality very quickly to our customers, and we have an excellent support team as well as consulting team, along with the sales and channel operations that we have to be able to engage with those customers. And again, from our Metropolitan Detroit office is primarily where our development, our quality assurance, as well as customer service are located. But overall, what we want to do is focus on the user's experience to make it easy for them to adopt the solution, the product quality to make it effective within the organization once it's being rolled out. And from a product standpoint, again, we've got the strong integration of the different back office financial and ERP solutions. The functionality as far as the approvals goes, the mobile applications, the robust engines to be able to make sure that you're able to handle those exceptions are a very key part of what we do. Flexibility, ease of use, OCR capabilities, take a picture of your receipt if you're using the expense application and be able to recognize that and create the expense line. You have the integration with the PunchOut vendors, and again, very important, unlimited routing rules, approval paths, notifications throughout, and visibility throughout the entire application with the solutions that we offer.
All right, thanks, Boy. We really appreciate you coming today, and we're very excited for all the things that are going on over at Paramount. Now it's time for the final section of today's session, and that is the Q&A. We've had quite a few questions come in during the session. We'll try to get to all of those. I'm not sure whether we'll have time to get to all of them, but we will get back to your questions via email. So if you have questions, please continue to enter those into the Q&A box, and we'll get back to you. So first question we have is, what's the best first step in getting ready for automation? I'll take this one. So I think the best first step is to look at process. We have a saying at Patient Advisors, and it's you can't automate a flawed process. When you do, you'll just end up with just as many problems as you solved with automation. So I would say, look at your process, talk to your stakeholders, talk to people in accounts payable, talk to people, throughout the hierarchy in procurement, operations. Listen to pain points, gather that data, and talk to the executives. You could also talk to us. We do lots of corporate consulting engagements where we're helping organizations get ready for automation and choose the best technology. But a lot of it's you can do it yourself, and a lot of our research online is free, so feel free to check that out as well. Next question is, I think it's probably a two-part question actually for Foy. One person says, how long does it take to implement? And another one is, how is your product deployed? Foy?
Sure. Okay, from an implementation standpoint, obviously that's going to depend a little bit upon the modules that are going to be implemented as well as the number of users that you're going to have. But you can typically expect, if you're focused on the project, 60 to 90 days. Certainly it could take a little bit longer. Again, if you've got departments that are around the country or around the world that you're going to be rolling this out to. We do use a train-the-trainer approach, so our team is going to train your project team in the setup and maintenance of the software so that you're going to be able to handle the new routing rules and changes to routing rules, add new users, and add new departments and that type of functionality. And then we're also going to train you on the usage of the software as a project team. Most of our customers roll out the end-user training on their own. In other words, they train their own users. Certainly some of that timeline could be dependent upon you. And as far as deployment goes, this might make a little bit of difference in the actual time as well. We do offer on-premise as well as software as a service solutions. Some of that is dependent upon the back office that you may be running. So certainly we do have many different customers as well as prospects that are running the traditional on-premise ERP solutions where you're going to be installed on a web server in your local IT environment and then integrated over into the financials. We also do offer software as a service. Our software as a service offering is the same workplace application that we've talked about. It's simply being managed and run in the cloud. It can still be integrated to many different on-premise solutions, but then also certainly to the SaaS ERPs that are out there. And we could also be hosted by a third party. So if you were going to have a third-party host either your financials, your ERP, and or just want them to be able to host Workplace, then we can accomplish that as well.
Excellent. So next question is, how do I know if there will be an ROI? I will take that one. First you can check out our cost per invoice calculator on our website and cost per PO calculator on the Paramount website. You definitely want to establish those key performance indicators now so you can look at cost metrics to see how far you have to go. You might feel a little discouraged if your costs are high, but that's actually a good thing because you have the greatest opportunity to achieve cost reduction and other benefits. You can certainly also call us directly and we can do a study with you to measure the potential ROI of procure-to-pay or expense management solution. One thing I can tell you is that if you're at least of a certain size, say 1,000 invoices a month, and you're currently completely manual or paper-based, it's pretty much all but guaranteed that there will be a long-term positive ROI. All right, I think we have time for one more question. It's fairly straightforward. Foy, this one's definitely for you. What is your pricing model?
From a pricing standpoint, it's going to go back a little bit to the previous questions regarding how are we deployed. A little bit of the pricing is going to be dependent upon that as well. So we are going to be priced based upon module as well as named user. So depending upon which particular modules you need, and certainly based upon our conversations today, we're looking for you to do both the procurement and the AP automation, and then also dependent upon how it's deployed, that can affect the cost. If you're on-premise, then you typically buy the software. It's called a perpetual license, and you pay an annual maintenance fee. And there's many of our customers that are under that type of pricing. But we also do software as a service, which tends to be monthly contract based, so that you would pay a monthly fee for a contracted period of time, which is typically 36 months. That's also a bit based upon the different modules and users that you have, but certainly a little bit different model if you're going to go the software as a service option.
All right, well, that wraps up another edition of PayStream's webinar. I'd like to thank Foy for coming today and Paramount for sponsoring this webinar. Foy, thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And thank you for everyone that attended today. This webinar will be available for on-demand download within a few hours after this live session. So if some of your colleagues missed it, just be sure to check it out.